Hello, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do the next of the conversations about NESARA. What we're going to talk about is some of the basics. Coming right up. Okay, so when we talk about NESARA, I was telling you firstly, if you watched the first episode, it's only 10 minutes long. I'm trying to keep them short. I'm going to talk real quickly on that kind of thing. But we were talking about my miracle healing and the event of witnessing the punishment of the wicked. Now that's the backdrop of that thing. And this happened in December of 19. Now, I want to forward you along. So I have had, when I went through this event, I had CSF fluid that was removed. It's a lumbar puncture. Now, one of the things most people don't realize is when you have that, you have like a 10 to 2 week period of time, 10 day to 2 week period of time, where you have this massive headache, and it is an unrelenting headache. And as I've talked to people about that, it's similar to a migraine, but it never stops. The only way I could get it to stop is to lay flat on the ground. We used to put a pad out in my office at home, and I would just be at home. I could barely sit up much of the time. And I'm still kind of processing everything that happened to me because that was a big hole in my life. But I do remember, so we moved from one address to another if you watched the old video in 2019. So we're kind of coming toward into 2020. So this would be January of 2020. And I remember driving down the street. Now we used to be at a zip code of 74135. So we moved, and I changed all the credit cards and the business credit cards and all this other stuff for the business car, and we moved to 74133. So I drive down the street, not even, just on this 71st Street, and I go to this one Quick Trip. It's a gas joint, okay? And I'm in there, I pop in the card, and I punch in 74135. And I'm not even cognizant of what it is, right? And I'm like, well, why is it working? And, kind of railing at the thing, but I'm not really not really figuring it out there. And it's like, wow, this is a cruddy, whatever, Then I drive off and I go up to Memorial and 61st. So it's a little different, place. I then say, I then pop it in, but I put 74133. That's the new address. The credit card goes through. Oh, that must be just a cruddy joint over there. And it's an older one versus the newer one. I think there's something wrong with it. And as I'm leaving, God goes, shut up for a minute. Let me tell you what happened. You were in essence trying to defraud the credit card. I was like, no, I wasn't. I know you weren't you were not meaning to, but that's exactly what you did. Oh. And it got me thinking from that moment of it was a setup. God was trying to set me up with this conversation, because I have a constant conversation with the Lord on so many areas, but that was just one of them. What you have to see is that I'm going to use a Mark Z reference, the lollipop, the thing in your shoulder here that they give you for this idiot C19 stuff. And not even a few months later, obviously we were in the middle of C19 and everything goes, hell in a handbasket here. And they were trying to introduce the little, jab points and push this out here. And it obviously took months and months before that happened. And, there are a lot of prophecy teachers, when they were looking at this stuff, they were saying, it's the mark of the beast. And I've had this conversation so many times I can't tell you, because I can quote scripture to people and I can talk through, end time issues. I'm trying to reconcile what's going on in 2020. Is it end time related versus the understanding of end time teaching? And, are we at that point? And I'm sitting there going, I don't know how to reconcile some of this stuff. But this was the beginning of understanding how this NESARA thing actually fits and how the biblical kind of nature is occurring. So one of the things you have to see is that I had this conversation with actually a pastor, and it went, kind of deep. It was a Twitter kind of thing. It was back and forth, and it was relatively okay until he was like, haven't you read Revelation 13:18? I'm like, yeah. It says, if anyone has wisdom, let him calculate the number of the beast. That's the number of man. His number is 666. And he goes, yeah. And I said, but have you read Revelation 13:1? And it made him pause, and he actually didn't say anything ever again with me. The reality, what Revelation 13:1 stipulates is there has to be an antichrist that moves into a false prophet, that moves into the image of the beast, which gets you to the mark of the beast. Now you're going, how does this relate to NESARA? What you have to see is that the Great Reset conversation tried to force feed the world a mark without the beast. It tried to push in Satan's way of doing a defrauding event. And see, if this little thing that you couldn't buy and sell in your social credit and all this other stuff, if that would have happened, then it would have invalidated Scripture, because you have to have a beast. And we're going to explain that just a little bit more and a little more detail with that. But that was the first level of invalidating, trying to invalidate Scripture, because it would have set it up here. And I want to share with you the answer from God is no, you don't get to do that. It's exactly the same thing that happens in my miracle healing event. And you go, what? I mean, that's exactly what God did. Satan's trying to kill me in 2019. And God's going, you don't get to. And I remember sitting there going, why doesn't he get to kill me? I mean, who cares about me? I remember there was at that same time, so I'm going to end with this little point. At the same time, there was a little 3-year-old at Bethel Church in Redding, California. And I think she was the daughter of one of the worship leaders. And I remember hearing about this and the desperate attempt of this church to pray over this daughter that she wouldn't really die. And they didn't even have the funeral for a while too. And I'm sitting there now, at the time I'm 53 or whatever it was. And I go, God, I'm just a 53-year-old guy. Just go ahead and kill me, and I'll give my life for that 3-year-old. I mean, you'd kind of not cared. You would not have cared about me at that time frame. I barely had the YouTube channel going. No one knew about me. It wasn't a big deal. But I'd easily, I'll be in heaven. To be absent in the body is to be present with Him. I'm cool with that. I've always been cool with that. And yet I was willing to kind of do that. And that was some of the reconciliation of the survivor guilt that I had to go through in that time frame. But God said, no, I'm doing something special. Now, it might seem to you that's really sad and sick, but God always has a purpose in what He's trying to do. And there also is evil in the world, and they're trying to, and Satan's whole job is to kill, steal, and destroy. So your anger needs to be over with Satan in that way too. But you have to see that God is doing a job throughout this situation. So we're going to share more about that as we go along. So we'll hit the part 3 in just a minute. Thanks so much.